Hey guys and girls, Bored now back with you, and on this video I'm going to be talking about the first episode of season 2 of the X-Files. It is called Little Green Men, so I will be going into full spoilers as always, and I'm excited to get into this new season. Much great stuff ahead, I can tell you. And this opening episode, well, it aired in September of '94. It is directed by David Nutter, who at this point is establishing himself as one of the top directors on the show. And we also have a classic writing team of Morgan and Wong, Glenn Morgan, James Wong. Definitely a great team. Have or will come up with some of the best scripts in the X-Files. And the episode got roughly about 16.1 million viewers in the old Nelson ratings, as reliable as those are. Take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But it's roughly right, so a pretty good number for this season opener. So, following on from the dramatic cliffhanger from last season where the X-Files were closed down at the start of this season, obviously the writers partly working around Gillian Anderson's pregnancy, Mulder and Scully have been reassigned. So Scully is teaching like students basically, or teaching like med students, forensic students, that kind of thing. And Mulder has been put on the dreaded wiretap duty for cases which he basically sees as being a bit beneath him and not really worth his time. And meanwhile, Mulder gets a tip-off of this site in Puerto Rico. He's had contact with this similar sort of character to Deep Throat, this scientist character, but probably a bit more of a highbrow sort of snooty Deep Throat. But he gives him this tip off of this of these bases around the country, around the world, where supposedly they're like satellite signal bases where you can supposedly pick up readings or signals from UFOs. And so Mulder's given this anonymous tip. It's all done very much in secret, so they have this sort of meeting in his office where he plays like music to kind of drown out the fact that they're talking about covert, UFO style activities. He writes a note to say they might be listening in. So we're getting into all that and just partly getting into the frame of mind of Mulder and Scully, and how Mulder in particular has kind of sort of let himself go and is sort of soul searching, wondering if the whole X-Files thing was worthwhile in the first place. And I guess it's quite a nice character beat for Scully in this, the fact that she's actually the one to tell him that she now believes, and that gives him the pep talk, basically not to give up on the X-Files or not to stop believing. And we just get into the fact that Mulder's very paranoid about being watched potentially, and how he has to like meet up with Scully in secret if they do meet up, and how he's worried because at one point she meets him in this parking lot, where the only reason she called the meeting was because she was worried about him, and he's kind of critical of that, saying, we can't meet willy-nilly, basically. So he's very paranoid that they might be listening in or watching them. But it all leads to, as I said, Mulder getting this tip and going to this place in Puerto Rico, and the fallout from that, and then Scully obviously being worried about Mulder and going after him, and that's the plot of the episode. But it also filters back to the cigarette smoking man, who I think definitely in this episode takes a big step to becoming the sort of main villain of the season. It's also a big episode for Skinner as well, I'd say that. So my overall feelings is that it's a very solid first episode back. It's good stuff really for the most part. There's definitely weak moments. It's a solid, not great opener, I would say. But it does a pretty decent job of reintroducing things and kind of setting up where their mindsets are at this point and where the characters are, and then setting up things that are going to be happening moving forward. One thing to say about the season, I think at the start of the season at least, because you don't have the classic Mulder Scully partnership from the off at least, then I think the early episodes do suffer a bit because of that, because that is such a big part of the show. But this one maybe not so bad in that, because you do get at least a few interactions between them, but obviously it's sort of showing you where each one is. But I think that's going to be a sort of a thing at the start, where you might find season 2 is a little bit slow at the beginning because of that. I have a couple of complaints about the episode. One is I think there's just a couple of like clunky bits of dialogue, which I guess can be explained just because they were trying really hard to sort of set things out and really say this is the opening episode, this is what we're going for, and just I think they just tried a bit too hard at times. So you have this line of dialogue from like one of Scully's students where she's kind of like, because Scully is like dazing off into space, and the idea is that she's thinking of Mulder. And yeah, the student's like, "Oh, you're looking kind of spooky," and just the whole thing and the delivery, it's really bad, cheesy stuff. And that's one of those examples where they were trying almost too much, where a bit of subtlety in the writing could have served it. I kind of like how Mulder in this looks very like grubby and sort of brooding. He's not quite his sort of slick, attractive self. But I will say, actually, the opening like monologue from him, where he does this voiceover, which is sort of setting up the idea of this sort of signal, and because the coordinates from the signal are like from like the spaceship Voyager, but some of his dialogue in the voiceover when he's setting up that idea, it's just really dreary and portentous, and there's just some really bad bits of dialogue that he just sort of mumbles. I mean, it sort of reminds me of the Harrison Ford kind of forced like voiceover, which he was made to do for like one of the versions of Blade Runner. So it's that sort of thing. I really didn't like that opening monologue, although I could see what they were going for. But it's a strong episode generally. Some of the stuff they do with the characters, some of the stuff out at the base I quite like, and the tension, like when you know the sort of the authorities come after Mulder, and he's in this sort of situation because there's this other character Jorge out there who is almost like Mulder's equivalent, but he's like Puerto Rican. I'm assuming he's meant to be, and that they have a bit of like communication, but he's much more on edge, much more paranoid, and it's almost like because he's been there for so long. So it's that sort of idea, but I kind of like the fact that there's another Mulder almost just like from a different sort of culture. And there's some nice touches. Again, it sort of builds on that kind of paranoid political type feel than it started to set up at the end of season 1. I quite like Scully, trying to track Mulder, going to his apartment, trying to just search for clues to what he's up to or where he might be. And then when a couple of FBI agents come in, she covers by saying, "I'm here to feed his fish," basically. And I think we again see how smart Scully is in this episode, how she thinks on her feet. There's a trick later in the episode she pulls when she cottons on to the fact that she's being followed at the airport. And she sort of doubles back and she allows them to overhear her and makes them think that she's getting on a flight, and in reality she's getting on a different flight. So we again see what good instincts Scully has, and how cunning she is. So it's well directed. There's some good, like the end stuff when Mulder and Scully have to make like a quick sort of getaway, and Mulder because the character of Jorge, he ends up dying mysteriously. He just goes crazy and runs out into like the rainforest and is like found dead by Mulder, and Mulder just thinks that, hey, I can use his body, we can examine it and maybe there'll be evidence. But Scully reminds him, hey, you'll never get out of the country, which is a good point. But yeah, stuff like that is really good stuff. I thought the action when they're being chased is kind of good. And there's some good like character stuff in the episode, some good tension. As I said, it's a good episode for Skinner because it sort of confirms him as someone who's very fair-minded, as someone who could be an ally to Mulder and Scully. Because I think in his debut last season, he was quite an ambiguous character. And I mean, talking of subtlety, I said in some cases there weren't subtlety, but quite a subtle scene is the scene with, two scenes really, with Skinner in the office with cigarette smoking man, because obviously they find out that Mulder's left his post and has gone like AWOL. So obviously this alerts them, and cigarette smoking man wants to like find Mulder, and there's a line there where he like puts his cigarettes down, and Skinner says, "I don't smoke," or "I don't smoke that brand," I think is the line. And that's a cool little sort of knockback where he's basically saying, yeah, I'm not part of your thing. I'm not working with you. Just doing my job recently. I'm not part of your inner circle. So it's almost like a metaphor for that. So that's kind of cool. And then in the scene, I can't remember if it's the last scene, but right near the end where Skinner basically chews Mulder out for like running off, and it looks as though at one point he's going to fire Mulder, and then Mulder points out that he was being wiretapped, his apartment, which the FBI guys told Scully earlier, and he says, well, it's illegal to wiretap someone without approval from the authorities, from the law. A man of the book, really. He's not going to play any favourites, but they've been doing a wiretap on Mulder's apartment. He tells cigarette smoking man to get out, to get the hell out, which again is a pretty fist pumping moment for Skinner. But yeah, he doesn't sack Mulder. He says, just go back to your desk, just carry on with the wiretap. And it's this nice little moment because I think one of the reasons he didn't fire him is because he sees some value in Mulder and in his work, and probably in the back of his mind, he thinks, well, there may be a reason one day to restart the X-Files, but he definitely sees that Mulder as an asset to the FBI, and to be fair, he probably quite enjoys the Mulder being around, probably ticks off the cigarette smoking man, but that's a really good scene. It's an important scene for Skinner as a character. I think if there was any doubt, it sort of confirms that this is a good sort of by the book sort of guy who's doing an honest job and can be like an important ally to Mulder and Scully. So that's all good stuff. It's a solid episode. I don't think it's amazing, but it's a pretty decent start to the season, and I'm gonna give Little Green Men 7 out of 10. So there's much better to come, but it's give Little Green Men 7 out of 10. So there's much better to come, but it's a very watchable first episode, I say, and does a good job. There's some of the character stuff I think is the best stuff in the episode. So that's Little Green Men. I'll be back with a review of the second episode of season 2, which I think is called Host, if I remember correctly. So I'll be back with that again soon. And don't forget to like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to also share it out on social media. And I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.